Today we're going to talk on the global patterns of nevi. Global patterns. These are the global patterns: diffuse reticular, patchy reticular, peripheral reticular with central hypopigmentation, peripheral reticular and central hyperpigmentation, homogeneous, peripheral reticular with central globules, peripheral globules, globular, multi-component, two-component nevi, and finally, homogeneous globular. The reticular pattern. This is a typical network. This is a reticular pattern with a uniform network that fades at the periphery. And it's characteristic of either a Clark nevus, lentiginous junctional nevus, or a dysplastic nevus with mild atypia. Another example of a reticular pattern, and you can see how this network fades into the periphery. Patchy network. These are often seen with nevi with congenital-like features. The patchiness is often due to the fact that you have these white areas, which is actually perifollicular hypopigmentation. Here we see the terminal hairs with the perifollicular hypopigmentation. Peripheral network pattern with central hypopigmentation. These are either seen with a Clark nevus or a nevus with congenital-like features. You can see the central hypopigmented area, and these are very, very commonly seen in individuals with Fitzpatrick 1, 2, and 3 skin. Note also in the near ultraviolet light the numerous milia-like cysts. And then we have a peripheral network pattern with central hyperpigmentation. The dark structureless area in the center is often called a blotch, and it's due to the heavy pigment throughout the epidermis down into the papillary dermis. Homogeneous, structureless, no network or globules. In this instance, it has areas of gray and brown and perhaps black structureless area. This is a blue nevus and very, very characteristic of these homogeneous lesions. Reticular globular. This is a pattern with central globules and a network that thins at the periphery. It's commonly seen either with Clark nevi or nevi with congenital-like features. Peripheral globular pattern, symmetrical peripheral globules. You can see these quite nicely in the near ultraviolet light. These are growing lesions. Another example of a growing lesion with this symmetrical peripheral globular pattern, and again, the beauty of near ultraviolet light. And one final example with its enlarging peripheral globules, again, very, very characteristic in the near ultraviolet light, this symmetry, and it is quite distinct. Globular pattern. This is the type of pattern that we see with congenital nevi, either superficial type or intradermal type. In this instance, a congenital nevus intradermal type, a Miescher nevus. Here we have another globular pattern. This has been called the cobblestone pattern. It's characteristic of nevi with congenital-like features, or most commonly with congenital nevi. Homogeneous globular. There are some structureless areas and globules, and equally important are the slightly curved vessels, which are very characteristic of congenital nevi intradermal type. Two-component pattern. It's a collision of two nevi, the superior portion a reticular pattern, the inferior portion a globular pattern. Multi-component, there's network, globules, and structureless areas. It's organized and symmetric, and these are characteristic of congenital nevi. Sometimes they are difficult and need to be biopsied. Finally, a congenital nevus which shows you dramatically the numerous Millie-like cysts, and see how nicely they're seen in the near ultraviolet light. Thank you for your attention.